Well, thank you so much, Carol. And good morning, ladies. It's good to see you, and we look very much forward to hearing your presentation. My name is Emmanuel Caudillo. I serve as a senior advisor with the White House Hispanic Prosperity Initiative here in Washington, D.C. And then I'll pass it along to Jen to introduce herself.
Good morning. I'm Jen Patia-Howell. I'm the co-executive director of Virginia Civics, which is the home of the Virginia We the People program. And I produce 3 national security podcasts.
My name is Tom Tinder, and I'm an attorney from Charleston, West Virginia.
Now to our presenters, may you introduce yourself and your teacher.
I'm Delaney Johnson.
I'm Jaden Dare.
I'm Abby Carlson. This is our teacher, Mrs. Nolan.
Wonderful, wonderful. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to read the question, and then following the reading of the question, you may begin. So here we go. In the Virginia Plan, James Madison proposed proportional representation in both houses of Congress. The delegates rejected Madison's proposal in favor of the Great Compromise. What is the Great Compromise, and how was it justified? Do you think the founders' justification is acceptable today? Why or why not? What are the advantages and disadvantages of equal representation in the Senate? What are the advantages and disadvantages of changing the Senate to proportional representation? You may begin.
In the year 1787, the United States won the quarrel. While they had recently fought together for freedom from England, the states were now in dispute. One particular argument was a disagreement about state representation in the government. James Madison stepped up and presented the Virginia Plan. It promoted the thought that all states, large and small, should have proportional representation in both houses of Congress. That meaning, depending on the number of people in the state may get more votes than others. For example, in California and Rhode Island were to vote for the same cause, California would have more votes because it has a bigger population. Still, not all members thought this would be a good idea. One member, specifically William Peterson, disagreed so much he came up with the New Jersey Plan. This plan designated that the government should only establish one house that uses equal representation. The members of the Philadelphia Convention were split in between the two plans. Eventually, 2 delegates, Roger Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth, developed an accommodation of sorts. They agreed that it was important to have both equal and proportional representation. Hence emerged the Connecticut Compromise, which is now better known as the Great Compromise. This compromise promoted the idea that the House of Representatives would use proportional representation while the Senate would continue with equal representation.
Though men like James Madison, Rufus King, Governor Moore still opposed the settlement, the majority overruled their objections. This compromise was passed on July 16, 1787 by a 1-vote margin. The founders believed that the agreement was just and fair because it used a bit of both plans. Overall, it made most large and small states equally satisfied. We collectively believe that the founders' justification is acceptable today owing to the fact that it has lasted so long. As an example, take the Articles of Confederation. The founders established the Articles in 1777, however, they were demolished only a decade later. Unlike the Articles, the Great Compromise is still thriving in today's government. As stated earlier, the agreement was passed in 1787, and now 234 years later, we are still using the House of Representatives as well as the Senate House for what they were meant for. There are many advantages and disadvantages to equal representation in Congress. Starting with the advantages, one major benefit would be that every state has equal representation and the smaller states would have a say and be heard more. The population of a state or an area can't overrule, and it promotes fairness from a regional perspective, counting individuals in a way that represents their state by a popular majority. This advantage leads to a huge disadvantage. People feel like their vote doesn't count. From the very beginning, when the founders proclaimed as we, the people, were supposed to promise that we would be treated as one people, we should be sure to include that people in the government.
However, with equal representation, we can only have that to an extent. These are downsides to equal representation, just like there are benefits, like how the larger populated states' senators have to work harder and different areas in the states may not get their voice heard at all. This can lead to people feel like their voting is pointless. On the other hand, proportional representation in the Senate has both benefits and drawbacks. It inspires more people to speak out, including minorities who could win seats if enough people voted for them. It also implies that they have to pay attention to their core backers rather than swing voters. Proportional representation also gives voters the feeling that their votes are meaningful. It often results in coalition governments, enabling more voters to represent by a single government. The majority of the world's leading nations use proportional representation. Nevertheless, this form of representation has certain downsides as well. Extremist groups and viewpoints have an easier time getting appointed. It has the potential to establish parliamentary gridlock in which work cannot be completed with one of the parties is opposed. Since these groups have no ties to the region, they are less likely to concentrate on local concerns. When a political party holds enough influence, it will exert leverage over whatever they want, which might lead to an abundance of poor decisions. Still, in the end, we tend to focus on the benefits. With the proportional representation, we keep peace between the large states. Overall, the Great Compromise was a huge win for the United States then and now. Thank you for listening. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll begin with the discussion period. And so I'll kick it off with the first question. You were talking about it near the end of your presentation. So if you had the opportunity, should we change the Constitution to make representation in the Senate based on population? Why or why not?
I personally believe that we should keep the Senate as it is because it does help the smaller states get their voice heard. And if we decide to change it to proportional, it will almost squash their voice. And it is important that all the states act united with all their voices being heard.
I agree, because if we do keep it like not proportional, then the voices of the smaller states will be heard, and it will just keep the unity between all the states.
I agree with my colleagues, but I also disagree. I feel like if we were to change the Senate and make it proportional, I feel like it might be a little bit better, because then people feel like they're being heard more, and then more people may end up voting, which may lead to us having better elections and a better outcome of what could happen.
Great. So what advantages or disadvantages does equal representation in the Senate give to your state specifically?
I believe that because we live in Indiana and our state is not necessarily a large state, but it's not a super tiny one either, equal representation doesn't affect us as much because we are kind of that middle size. I believe that we both benefit from both the representation in the House of Reps and the Senate.
You talked during your presentation about coalitions and parties, political parties. Do you think it would be beneficial if we had more political parties such as various other countries have, so that there would need to be a coalition among several parties in order to get legislation passed, rather than just now when we have two and whoever has the majority basically gets what's done, and we have gridlock sometimes? What's your opinion about having multiple political parties? What are the advantages and disadvantages?
I think we should only have two political parties like we have right now, because if we have more, then that will just create more disagreements and less unity.
I definitely agree with my colleague's answer, because you have to take into account what is happening right now in the world, especially with the previous couple of elections. There have been so many disagreements and arguments over political parties, especially between Democrats and Republicans. And if we create even more, it could get even worse, and we could come to the point of another civil war.
I agree with my colleagues, but I believe some disadvantage would lead to like the country not being in unity, and even possibly like being in different arguments like everywhere we go about our political party and which one we stand for. And having more political parties would just change the worldview, I believe, because then we may not have a fair election. Like there could be half and half or a fourth, and everybody could vote for who they wanted. But I think when more political parties, less people get their voices heard.
I'm just going to jump in really quick and follow up on that. What if you got rid of political parties? Would that help?
I believe that we could be in a greater unity with less political parties, because towards the very beginning, George Washington stated that we should not be forming any political parties because it will come to our end. And later Jefferson stepped up and formed his party. But I believe that without political parties, there could be a lot more unity because nobody is fighting over, well, I'm a Democrat, so I believe this and you're wrong because you're a Republican or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, I'll go with the next question. Something that you mentioned in the presentation that I heard talked about that if there's, I believe, proportional representation, I think the people would be, the elected leaders will be able to listen more to their core supporters than the swing supporters. Why do you think that's a better idea than to talk to someone who's more in the middle, trying to decide, trying to open to both sides? What do you think is more important for them to, what's trying to see your reasoning behind it?
I believe that proportional representation will help focus more on all the states rather than just the swing voters, because especially in elections, I feel like people or president candidates will go out to the states like Nebraska that may swing, can go either Democrat or Republican, because they need to focus on that state to get the votes that they need. And with proportional representation, it is less that you need to focus on just the few people that matter rather than the whole picture at large.
Let me follow up. You mentioned Nebraska, and Nebraska only has one house, so to speak. They're unicameral. They don't have a House and a Senate. I think it's just called a House, and that is their legislative body. Why do you think, and that, goes back to your comment about, I believe, the New Jersey plan that was just having one house. Why don't you think that other states have followed Nebraska's action to just have one house instead of having a House and a Senate? They just have one legislative body.
I believe that it is easier to stay where you are and follow the founders' decisions, trusting that they have lasted and that they are the right decision rather than follow something new. Change can always be scary and you don't know where it will go, especially when it comes to an entire state at large.
Going along with what my colleague said, change is definitely scary, but I feel as if maybe they didn't do it because all the states that were there before them, most of them had stuck with just having the House. And so for Nebraska to go and do the legislative, other states were just like, well, we don't know if that's going to work yet. So I feel like they just kept with what they knew was good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much. You all take a deep breath now that the presentation and the discussion portion is completed. And right now, the judges and I will share a few comments with you. And I just wanted to say, wow, thank you so much for a very comprehensive discussion. We've had a great discussion talking about just proportional representation, equal representation in the Senate, political parties. And so we went through a lot, which shows that you're prepared for this materials, and it showed, because that's why with us, we could go to beyond to what the question is, but go much deeper into other areas that affect those questions. And so I'd like to thank you so much on that presentation there. And just just a way just to enhance your presentations as you look as you continue on. When it comes to political parties, we have actually multiple political parties in this country, but we have two major ones: the Republican and the Democratic Party, that make up most of the elected officials. And so I think the way to enhance it is to say, like, well, we got many political parties, but is there a way to increase it, or maybe decrease the influence of the two major parties or something? But that's just something just to enhance your presentation for next time as you continue digging into into civic education. But overall, just to say thank you so much for a great presentation, and I enjoyed it, and I'll pass it on to my fellow judges for their comments.
All right, thank you, ladies. That was a fantastic start to the morning, and I really loved your opening statement and the story that you told. So you took us along on a little historical journey there, and I really enjoyed that. I would say, something to maybe think about for tomorrow's presentation is maybe give a few more examples in your answers. So during the follow-up, and maybe our questions weren't really, leaning you in that direction, but just try to make sure that when you give an answer that you've always got some kind of example in there. That would really just help to showcase how well you really know this material. And I know you really know this material. But I really enjoyed this discussion. As judges, we sort of game plan ahead of time and have an order in which we ask questions. And I totally ignored that because I just really felt like I wanted to jump in and ask you guys something and keep having that conversation with you. So with apologies to my fellow judges, I really enjoyed our conversation. So good luck. Good job.
This was, of course, our first round. This was our first group that we've talked to, and this, of course, was your first opportunity to be in front of the judges. And I must say that I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because we didn't have more time, to talk and to learn from you. You gave just an excellent presentation. It was very well done. I agree completely with what Jen said. I commend you for in your initial presentation having it be a story. It was very interesting, and it followed very clearly from one point to the next. And what I think is very important is that you answered the question and the sub questions in that initial 4-minute presentation. Sometimes some groups don't do that. They just go off on tangents or whatever, but you went right down the order that it was presented to you. And then your answers to all the questions were very good, particularly when there were questions that were just a little bit off base. The question I asked you about the two parties and the question I asked you about Nebraska. You really did well and showed your depth of knowledge. I'd make one suggestion to you. You operated very well as a team, but you agreed with your colleagues, and that's great. And you're a team, but you might want to consider giving the other side of the argument. Say, you considered this and this is your position, but you also considered these other points, but came back and this is your opinion and your decision as a team. Just give us a sort of a point counterpoint type situation, because you definitely have the knowledge and the understanding. Let me just say finally that you just cannot let this We the People program be a class project or a semester activity. You have so much knowledge and leadership skills. Please continue to use them in your schools and in your community and in the great state of Indiana, because we need to have young leaders like you for our future. Congratulations to you. Thank you and good luck.